So I guess I need, oh, sounds like it's on. All right, that's already ahead of the game then for this early on Sunday morning, or at least it seems this early on Sunday morning. So yeah, this talk will be called Confessions of a True Impostor, and we'll sort of find out what that means going on. But before I do that, I want to actually take a couple of very brief detours. So this conference has sort of been dedicated to the memory of John Pinner, and I really wish I could say that I knew him well. Unfortunately, I did not. I only met him at EuroPython a year ago, and then at PyCon UK last year. But I do have one memory that I wanted to share in his honor, and that was when I was here a year ago. I was wandering around trying to figure out what I was going to do with the talk or something, or whatever. I don't really remember. And I happened to wander by the cheese shop where John was holding court. And he grabbed me, gently, but I mean, come on. He grabbed me and pulled me. It's like, have you actually had real cheddar from Cheddar? You must have this. And I tried it, and it was truly, truly delightful stuff. But the thing that struck me at the time was his obvious delight at sharing something good. And I think, having worked on the crew organizing that this year, I think that we all felt both his presence and his absence very keenly sometimes. But I can tell you that spirit of sharing something good was really what I think drove everyone as we tried to put together the conference. So if nothing else, I think that he would be very, very proud of that. So that is my one little bit that I knew about John Pinner. As I say, I wish I would have known more. Secondly, I want to thank everyone. As probably most of you don't know or care, I worked in London for the past year and a half, and I think that sort of to my surprise, probably to your surprise, who knows, I found being here in the UK was a place that really felt like home to me. And I think that was largely because of the people I met, and that means that was largely all of you. So I made friendships. You treated me kinder than I had dreamed of, so I want to thank you for that. Now, this time for sure, let's get started with the talk. So I need to make a confession. And of course, you may gather where I'm going with this. My confession is that I am an imposter. I am not at all qualified to be standing here in front of you. I've never taken a computer science course in my life. Okay, I made most of my career as a teacher, and you know what they say about teachers, those who can do. I come from the middle of nowhere in the United States. Actually, you'd have to go to the middle of nowhere and then take the next plane out to get where I come from. Many things here. In other words, I'm trying to gently say this is like an enormous error in judgment to actually speak in front of you. So you may guess where I'm going with this. I would say that I suffer from, or something that we commonly call imposter syndrome. And before I got ahead of myself a little bit there. So this will be one of the two audience participation bits here. This is the easy one. So how many of you have heard the term imposter syndrome? Okay, most of you. As there are a few hands not up. Either it's too early and you're tired, or you haven't heard of it. But so I went to, of course, the source of all knowledge, Wikipedia, to get a standard definition of imposter syndrome. And this one is as good as any, I suppose. So imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon in which people are unable to internalize their accomplishments. Despite external evidence of their confidence, those with the syndrome remain convinced that they are frauds and do not deserve the success that they have achieved. Notably, imposter syndrome is particularly common amongst high-achieving women. So that is a commonly accepted definition. I think we could say that for sure. I will come back to that in a moment. So now, and here is where I'm setting you up. This is a double bind that you're not going to get out of easily. So now I want to get to the second part of my question here, which is how many of you are imposters? Before you answer, you have to think about this. Your choices are either you say yes, which means you're a loser, or you say no, which means you're arrogant. Okay, so you can kind of pick, but there's no way out. Okay, just say. So how many of you would say that you have in some way or another suffered from imposter syndrome along with me? Oh my God. Okay, so you know what this is doing to me, of course. I'm sitting up here thinking, oh my God, you're trying to talk to these people about imposter syndrome. They're all bigger frauds than you are. They're going to know I'm a fake. So yeah, so what are we like then, since we all seem to be suffering from this? So people who suffer from imposter syndrome tend to be people who are high achievers. And I want to sort of do a little detour on this. You may or may not have heard of something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It was something that, honestly, in 25 years of teaching, I noticed very early on. The Dunning-Kruger effect is that people who are unskilled tend to have no idea of how unskilled they are. Whereas people who are relatively skilled tend to minimize what it is they think they know. Because, oh, I can do this. It must not be that hard. And in fact, as a teacher, I saw this a lot, where you would ask a kid, so, how'd you do on that test? And they go, oh, well, if it was a kid who's really, just clueless, they go, well, it was really hard, but I think I got most of it right this time. And then you would see that, no, they got virtually all of it wrong. And then you would ask one of the kids at the other end of the spectrum, so how did you do? And they go, well, it wasn't too bad. I think I probably got 90% of it right. And, that would be the one where there would be like maybe one little thing that you would find wrong. So I've seen this all over the place. So it makes sense that people suffering from imposter syndrome actually would be the people who are fairly skilled at these things. Those are the ones who would doubt themselves. Also, traditionally, it's been said that women, just as was in the definition we saw before, that women tend to suffer from imposter syndrome more. In fact, in some of the earliest studies that came up with the phrase and saw this, it was a population of women that were studied. They actually went looking for it amongst women and found it. So that's no surprise. Minorities also tend to do that. In general, though, it seems to be anybody who has in some way beaten expectations for some value of expectations. There's always something, well, I really shouldn't be here because of X, Y, or Z, but I am, so I must be a fraud. So that seems to be how that goes. So a couple of notable examples of famous frauds. Kate Winslet has said that quite often she sort of almost can't get out the door because she feels like a fake. My favorite, Maya Angelou, after 11 books, still feels that this time people are going to figure out that she's been running a game on everybody and is really an enormous fake. Okay. So, again, not to put too fine a point on it, yes. If in fact imposter syndrome is so common, then who the hell am I to tell you about it? We almost know about it. And in fact, I've thought about talking about imposter syndrome a time or two before, and always came down to the conclusion that I would, again, as I said earlier, I'd be a fake if everybody else knows more than I do anyway. Except that there is, of course, one factor that I haven't mentioned, which is the elephant that is almost always in my particular room. And that is, as a transgender person, I have had a fair amount of experience with what you might call being an imposter. I can explain a little bit about that. I mean, obviously, I was in a position where, for a very, very, very long time, I felt compelled to make the world believe I was something that I wasn't. And it's really hard to describe what that is like. But this was a case, particularly when I grew up, where, oops, didn't mean to do that, where not being an imposter would have been a very disastrous thing. I mean, honestly, if I would have stopped being an imposter before the age of, say, 25, I probably would have had an even chance of being dead by 30. Honestly, if I would have stopped being an imposter before the age of 40, I would have certainly lost my job and lost almost everything. In other words, this was a very high-stakes game. And I will tell you that I was amazingly good at it. When I finally started telling people the truth, no one had guessed that at all. Now, people knew that there might have been something wrong. They said, you seemed tired, you seemed distant, you seemed like there was something going on. But nobody had guessed this. So that's why I think I can tell you about imposter syndrome at a level and at a depth that maybe some of you have not experienced before. And the other thing that I think I can talk about is, I think in many ways, I can claim to be a recovering imposter. I ultimately came to the point where it was worth risking everything and a certain number of losses, to be honest, to actually stop being an imposter in that way. So that's what I want to sort of deal with just a little bit today, is just some of the things that I think I can tell you from that experience. I would hope at least that this sort of extreme example can get something that may be interesting for you. So these are some things that I've learned. And the first thing, and this is probably the reason why we should all care, even if we are not particularly bothered by imposter syndrome, although you all say that you are affected by it, is that being an imposter is a very alienating thing. If, in fact, you are being an imposter, that is, you feel that you must conceal something in order to preserve position, whatever it is, this immediately builds a barrier. This inhibits your ability to form a connection. What this does, and even if you haven't thought about it, I'm pretty sure this is true, this creates this thing in the back of your mind where you're always thinking, but if they only knew about whatever it is, then things are going to change. And that immediately sets up a barrier for making a connection. This then applies also in terms of being part of a community. It also applies in terms of being able to take a risk and put yourself out there and do some things. So the reason that we need to care about imposter syndrome, other than the personal fact that a lot of us would suffer from it, is that this is something that actually inhibits, actually corrodes our community. This is something that everybody should care about. The other thing that I think is here is that everybody thinks of imposter syndrome as Wikipedia sort of said, a psychological problem. Now let's think about the implication of that. It's all in your head. If it's all in your head, then it must be your fault, right? If you could just stop it, just again, something that I have heard in many of my things. If you just not be that, it would be much better, right? If you just not be who you are. They say it's in your head. I don't think it really is. So let's go back to the Wikipedia definition again. I've done just a little bit of adding emphasis here. So it's a psychological phenomenon. Despite external evidence, they remain convinced of this thing that is not true, Oh, and by the way, who is they? They is high-achieving women. Okay, I think there are several things wrong with this. I was actually sort of struck as I started looking at this. I was like, wow, this is a classic example of some assumptions going on here. So if you look at this, what this says is basically, if you have imposter syndrome, you're crazy. You look at the evidence and see something else that's, and sorry for the ableist term. I mean, it's like you are unsound of mind. And who is most likely to be unsound of mind? Well, I think we know the answer to that. High-achieving women. Okay, I actually, in thinking about it, and of course this is purely my opinion, and I've already told you I'm a fake, so you don't have to listen. Purely my opinion is that this completely gets it wrong. And the more I look, the more convinced I am of this, to tell you the truth. I would actually phrase it this way. Imposter syndrome is a social condition. It's in society in which people have internalized society's negative prejudices against them. That is, the problem isn't that you're an imposter. The problem is that you've been told that you shouldn't be where you're at, and you believe it. All right? And you believe it because everybody believes it. It's impossible to go against those things, or at least very, very difficult. Despite external evidence of their competence, those with the syndrome have difficulty accepting the recognition of what they've achieved as genuine. That is, I know if you really knew the truth about me, you would take it back. Okay? And notably, imposter syndrome is strictly common amongst high-achieving people from marginalized groups. In other words, if in any way you have been persuaded you should not be here, you're going to be feeling imposter syndrome. It is not your fault. It is not in your head. It is the way that society is looking at you, and you are picking that up. Again, this is sort of colored by some of my many experiences, but this is the thing. This is not something that you can just say, oh, there's something wrong with you. It is not something wrong with you. So indeed, it is not your fault. And thinking about it that way, I think thinking about it that way is a way forward. Now, the bad news is you're not going to be able to cure this because, in fact, you are always going to be in this society. The society is always going to have these things. And I can tell you this, too, things that are ingrained from a long time in terms of societal values, things like that, are always going to be there. So there is no cure. I do not have a cure. As a matter of fact, I got no answers at all. Well, I have some suggestions. Let's put it that way. So I want to tell you some things that I do as I have worked through this process. And I think in general, they are probably useful as you deal with imposter syndrome. Certainly, these would be things that if you want to do something about this that might help. And of course, the first thing, always the first thing, is to recognize what's going on. To understand that this is, first of all, to see it coming and say, okay, I feel like I have absolutely no place here. I'm probably doing, this is probably something that's in my head, something that I need to deal with. And take it there and not let it get to you as much. I think if you actually know what's going on, that's sort of a first line of defense, feeble though it might be. The second thing to try to do, and these are kind of getting more difficult as I go along, is to be fair. And this is really the sneaky one because, of course, I don't know about your internal imposter syndrome voice. My internal imposter syndrome voice always invokes the fact that they're just being objective and this is the truth. You're an idiot and everybody around you is brilliant. Everyone can see that. It's the way that voice sounds. But in fact, what happens is you tend to do sort of a selective use of the evidence. So you see somebody being just absolutely brilliant, and you say, oh, yeah, that's the way they are all the time. And at the same point, you realize that time where everything is going wrong for you and saying, this is the way I am all the time. You're not fair, actually. You're taking your bad day and comparing it against their great day and saying, oh, I suck. The other thing that you should do is if you are interested in being fair, being objective, you should actually consider your strengths and achievements. You may think that they're all luck, but if they're starting to add up, you started to do this, you started to do that, something must be being done right, okay? So, you know, in my particular case, yes, I will tell you that I have no competence whatsoever in all of this software stuff, except that, you know, it's okay. It's been 20 years, and people keep asking me to do it. So I think maybe if I'm saying, geez, I suck, I don't know. I think maybe we've got a pattern here where I'm just doing this, just thinking this on my own. And the other thing, and this shows how old I am because most of you will not. Yeah, okay, this is one. All right, yes, old people. This comes from a comedy album years ago. Yes, we're all bozos on this bus. That is, every single one here. That person that you think is so brilliant. They're writing code 100 times faster than you can. They're doing whatever. Inside, they're thinking, oh, crap, they're going to find out I'm a fake. You know, we're all in the same boat here. And I think if you try to keep that in mind, that this person that you think is so wonderful while you're doing so badly, it also is facing some issues you don't know about. Even technically, there may be something that you think is very easy they have no clue about. That may help. And then, this is the good one. What I discovered as I was sort of wrestling with my issues, what the conclusion I came to, and this has served me the best of all, is that you can't be outed if you're already out. In other words, if you actually are going to be upfront about who you are and the things that you know and the things that you don't know, then you're no longer an imposter. Then you're not suffering from imposter syndrome anymore, at least not as much. Remember, I told you there's no cure. This is impossible to completely achieve. But if you actually are being honest, if you actually are being open about where you are, and again, I don't mean this sort of incessant sort of bad mouth, like, oh, I can't do that, or I can't. But if you're actually honest about who you are, then you're not an imposter. It's over. So to do that, actually, let's back up. This can be very hard. This is like enormously easy to say. Oh yeah, just be genuine and there are no problems. This is enormously hard. It is, to be honest, risky. So you know, you need to approach this sort of carefully. First thing you need to do is recognize that you cannot do this by yourself. Or rather, you can, but it will drain your energy. You need to have a support network. You need to have friends. You need to have somebody that you can talk to honestly. In fact, getting up in front of the world and outing yourself is pretty hard to do. I've kind of made a minor career out of it the past couple of years. Trust me, it's hard to do. But in front of one or two friends, it's not so bad. And then if things go wrong in another area, you have someone that you can talk to. Do not underestimate the value of this. If you have to go find people to do this, to try to do this, you need to have some sort of safe place where you can actually express that. Another thing that is very helpful, and this is also connected with a phenomenon called stereotype threat, is it very much helps to focus on what is important to you in your own mind. Now, to go back to stereotype threat, I don't know how many of you have heard the term stereotype threat. Yeah, not nearly as many. Stereotype threat is a phenomenon where if you are told that because of who you are not going to perform well, in fact, once it's in your head, you will not perform well. So there are classic examples with minority populations or women or whatever. It's sort of like they've done studies, two groups of women. One of them is told, by the way, this doesn't apply to you, but women do terrible at math. This has sort of been proven in studies. Okay, now we're going to do the math test. Okay, the scores go down. Whereas if you have another group that has not been told that, the scores do not go down. In other words, it's purely an example of you're told that you should be bad at this, And even if you fight it, it affects you. The antidote for that, and they've proven that this actually works to counteract this in large part, almost totally, is to think about the things that you particularly value and that matter to you. So what they did was they, after exposing them to this, oh, by the way, you suck, they then had them write an essay about what their core values were and what really mattered to them. And that did seem to sort of negate the stereotype effect. It works for imposter syndrome. I know it's just something that I do all the time. Honestly, this morning, right after I contemplated running away, I started telling myself, no, look, you're here, you're talking about this, you're going to do the best that you can. Those sorts of things. I value loyalty. You think about the things that you really, really are trying to get done in this world, and then say, okay, I'm going to do my best on that, and the fact that I don't know anything else, well, we're just going to do the best that we can on this. It helps. Try it. Trust me. And then the other thing that you would need to consider is that you cannot do this all at once. It takes practice to do this. You need to go in small steps. Again, sort of going in front of everybody and being open about this is sort of hard. Doing it in a small group, at a meetup in front of a person, in front of one coworker, and saying, hey, this doesn't make any sense at all to me. That sort of thing does help. And of course, I can tell you, if you start doing that in a small group, what you find is that they'll go, well, I understand that, but this other thing, who gets this? So that you actually start seeing what's going on. So it's, again, you don't want to go in and do this as an expectation that you're going to magically fix this all at once. I guess that's kind of something I'm saying here, is that you need to be kind to yourself as you're doing this. And I know that I've known a lot of people who's like, well, I'm just going to fix everything. I'm just going to do it right. That almost never works, I can tell you, both from my experience and from watching many, many students over the years and things like that. So do small steps and practice that. It does get easier as you get used to admitting that you're a complete clueless fraud. I do it all the time now. And then, as I say, this is the main part of all of this, is that you need to eventually, you need to, you don't need to, you can do whatever you want, I'm sorry, but I mean, if you want to be able to handle this phenomenon, this is the safest thing to do. And it is risky. I don't have, if some of you are already thinking this will be a great question to ask, I guess I can probably answer it even right now. I don't have some magic formula where you can go in and just tell the world and be sure that everything will be all right. It's not necessarily that easy. Certainly, if you're going to go this whole being authentic route, I wouldn't start with your boss. Just as a practical matter. Of course, you're not going to be lying to your boss, we hope, but I wouldn't go in and say, oh yeah, by the way, I'm totally clueless. May I have that rise now? No, it's not going to work. It is not easy. But I can tell you, having been on both sides, that not being an imposter is definitely something to strive for. It beats the hell out of being an imposter. So that's all I've got for you. Thank you.
So we've got some good time for some questions. So if anybody wants to ask a question, put your hands up. I see a couple of questions. Hi.
So I know there's been issues with people trying to better represent marginalised groups on Wikipedia, but did you try to edit the imposter syndrome page? If so, what happened? And if not, would you consider it? Or can I edit it with your definition?
I would be happy. Okay, so first of all, I wondered if somebody would ask me that question. I'm not totally shocked by that question. Secondly, no, I did not try to edit it because this conclusion came to me just about in the past week that this definition was what it was. And we had other things to do this week, I guess, is the way that I would put that. I would be happy to see somebody try that. I don't think I'm up for it myself. But if somebody wants to sort of dig around and develop this notion, then yeah, sure, I'd be happy for that.
Next question, please.
There's tons of self-help books that talk about being your authentic self and all that kind of thing. And in your experience, does that actually transliterate to be your authentic self as long as it coincides with society's norms?
I think the ones that I've looked at, and I actually have, I think I just closed that window so that they wouldn't embarrassingly pop up or something I was presenting. I think I actually have now something like 15 or 20 browser tabs worth of how to beat imposter syndrome. And not much of it does more than what you say. You know, some of it, it's not exactly the same thing, but some of it kind of reminds me of getting down to the old joke of sincerity's everything. If you can fake that, you got it made. And then a lot of it is, yes, just how you can go through the motions and somehow present the illusion of a more authentic self, which I find is what a lot of the self-help stuff is. So, yeah, not a whole lot, I don't think.
Great. Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to commend your Firesign Theater reference. And
Yes.
just a minor question. You said you should persuade yourself that it's not your fault. Maybe it's easier to persuade people that it doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you haven't done something that you're going to go to jail for.
I guess it depends. I mean, I think there I would be very much of the do whatever works school.